Hey folks, Randy Newberg here with another episode of Leupold's Hunt Talk Radio. How interesting that I am in Beaverton, Oregon right now, doing this podcast, getting ready to have our guest Tim Lesser, Vice President of Product Development here at Leupold, come and join me on the podcast. The idea is that we're going to talk about how new products go from idea to reality, and what it takes to get that done, all the hiccups along the way, all the places where feedback is given, the critical phases of it, and also not just new products, but how new ideas, how current products get tweaked and changed to be improved, and just how hard it is, or what the challenges are, I guess is a better word, of taking something that you say, rifle scopes, we are going to manufacture right here in Beaverton, Oregon, and we're going to do this at this manner, at this level of expectation, and we're going to do it with the customer in mind and all those challenges that go into it. So, quick as I click this over here, you're going to hear a discussion. I don't know for sure where it'll lead, but Tim and I have been on a couple hunts together. Get the chance to talk hunting talk when he comes with and talk about new product, and he and I visit regularly. He often sends me new stuff and says, Randy, go try this out. Our people want to know this or want to know that, and this might work in your style of hunting or whatever it might be. Amazing company that has accessibility, where what I mean by that is Tim will tell me, call these engineers, work with them, work with this person, work with that person, and give them your honest feedback. That's what we want. We know there's times it might not be the answer we want to hear, but it's the answer we need to hear. So really fun stuff to see how they do this and where it starts and how it ends up. So, but before we do that, I want to thank all of the companies that make this possible. Obviously, Leupold, like I said, huge supporters of all that we do, of public land hunting, of conservation. And Orion Coolers, if you want to save 20% on the best coolers I've been able to find, go out to orioncoolers.com and use promo code RANDY, R-A-N-D-Y, and you'll save 20% on really, really good coolers. GoHunt.com. Their insider service, we're getting ready to gear up for all of the leftover tags, the over-the-counter tags, the what-if kind of safety net scenarios for those who did not draw any of the limited entry tags. All that information is out there at Go Hunt. When you sign up for their insider service, use promo code RANDY and get $50 of free store credit in their gear shop. And then we have Onyx Maps. What more needs to be said about the game changer in how we apply for tags and how we hunt, how we do our e-scouting. Just unbelievable company doing so much for public access. If you go out to onyxmaps.com and you buy any of their app products, use promo code RANDY, and they're going to give you 20% off any of the products, the app-based products that they have out there. So all great companies, all doing everything they can to support us as we promote self-guided public land hunting and try to create more advocates for that cause. And with that, I'm going to turn on the other mic here. You're going to hear a little click, and Tim and I are going to have a fun discussion. Very engineering centric, which probably isn't a good thing to have an accountant trying to explain engineering concepts. But for those of you who hunt, shoot, and wonder about a lot of this stuff, I think you'll find Tim's insights, his experiences to be very, very helpful. So here we go. All right, folks, I told you that our guest was going to be a guy who holds a few trophies as it relates to the fresh tracks on your own adventures enterprise. Tim Lesser, the VP of Product Development from Leupold, is with me, and Tim still holds. Tim, you're like, you have the traveling trophy of the largest mule deer ever taken on our show. And probably the coldest temperature in which we've ever shot an animal.
I will take luck any day. Combined with your talent, just I'll follow you guys around, and if it ends that way, I'll take it. You know, I know I've been in lots of places where things should have come together and didn't come together at all. So,
yeah. Well,
it was a fun trip.
It was. Those of you who haven't seen it, if you go to our YouTube channel or our Amazon channel, Tim came to Montana on an elk hunt that turned into a mule deer hunt that was miserable cold. It was,
We were finding kind of our points of weakness. The gear was still trying to go, but at that 15 below, one of those days, the high was 15 below.
Yeah.
I found some of my points where my comfort level started to fade a little bit. The truck was looking better and better occasionally.
Yeah, the enthusiasm factor wanes after sitting on a ridge in those kind of temperatures with the wind blowing like that. One day we climbed up that ridge looking for elk. I think it was like the third or fourth day. And I just made the call. So Tim, Tyler Jonerson was filming it, and me. They're still younger and tougher than I am, where neither of them are going to say uncle. And I'm like, look, guys, I'm old. I'm more than happy to say uncle here if it keeps me from getting frostbite again. So what do you say we get off this mountain? I didn't get a lot of protests.
No, we didn't argue a whole lot. No. Even the animals knew better than to be out moving. Everything was hunkered up but us.
Well, thanks for being here, Tim. I really appreciate it.
No, thanks for having me.
I know how busy you guys are. One of the things I was hoping we could talk about is our audience loves to know about the whole hunting equipment spectrum, but we're always wondering, well, why? How does this process work? How does a new product get developed? Where do ideas come from? Why does maybe a product end up the way it is, or how did this solution get arrived at? No one even knew it was an issue, but they came up with a new product to solve this idea. And since you're the VP of product development here at Leupold, you kind of get to oversee that whole process.
I do, yeah. So we have a fantastic team here. There's more than 80 engineers, but this group entails is made up of the R&D team, and then you get into design engineering, manufacturing engineering. So once we have our design, which includes optics and electronics and all that, so each of those departments is here as well. Then we get it down into the manufacturability piece. And so we want to make sure that we're bringing a good value along with good innovation to the end consumer. So we're pretty vertically integrated, meaning that we've got all the things that we need right here. So you've seen the machine shop downstairs.
Yeah.
It's really easy comparatively to build 1 or 2 or 10 of something, but when you need to start building mass production and get it at the quality and the value levels that we want from our products, that's a lot of the art is making sure that we can do it on large production scale. Yeah.
Huh.
So that's where you really get the value, and I've inherited some of this from people that were really, really good and been doing it for a long time.
Yeah.
And so we just want to keep that tradition alive.
How long has Leupold been making rifle scopes?
We started, the company started in 1907, but then with that was water level measuring equipment, firefinders, compasses, as a matter of fact, things like that. And then we got into the rifle scope business in the 40s.
40, so 70-some years.
Yeah, I need to go back and double check that, to be honest.
Before either of us were born, suffice to say.
Yeah, so I want to fact check exactly which year that was. But we've been doing it a long time. The variables that a lot of people think of have been more like the 60s and 70s.
Yeah.
But we started with fixed powers and very first scope that was fog proof on the inside, stuff like that. Yeah. So a lot of legacy here.
Yeah, and when you do the factory tour, like I've been blessed to get to do, you get to talk to the people who are out in the shop. I mean, however many hundred people are out there building this stuff. And you ask them, well, how long you worked here? Oh, I've been here 28 years. And, I've been here, 20 years. You got a lot of talent out there that's been here, done that.
There are a lot of folks here. And it's definitely one big team that's one big family. So, we have, a dozen or more folks that have been here 40 plus years.
Whoa.
And so they've seen a lot of change when you think about that. And just the way that manufacturing has changed. And our shop floor, if you want to call it that, the manufacturing arm of this, we've got engineers and other folks, marketing, et cetera, all in the same building. But our shop is almost 500 of those employees.
Yeah.
By the time you get through assembly and everything else. And so they've seen a lot of change, and they know what works and what doesn't.
Yeah.
And that really helps.
So somebody says, I was out hunting, because all you guys, everyone I know who works here hunts and shoots avidly. Mm-hmm. Maybe, I don't know if that's part of your job description, if you're going to work here, or if it's just helpful, if you just say helpful if you have the skill, or required. But you guys, I mean, I walk around and everyone's got their taxidermy in their office. There seems to be no political correctness taboos here. We
think it's perfectly politically correct to show off that we're conservationists.
Yeah. So I'm just trying to walk through when a new idea or an improvement or something happens. Where does that process come from? A multitude? You never know where it's going to come from, but once you identify it, there's got to be some process you have for how you get to the end of a solution that you're trying to craft.
Yeah. So back to the initial part there. Everybody doesn't have to be a hunter or a shooter. We attract a lot of that. And certainly in some positions it is required. You're not going to have a product line manager, for example, creating a new product if they don't use that type of product. Right. But not every person here is a hunter or a shooter, but the vast majority. You get into some other areas. What we typically find is you may have someone new in, let's pick on finance, for example.
Yeah. With your background.
Exactly. Yeah. It's easy to pick on you. It may not have been a hunter or a shooter when they come in, and it's not necessarily critical to that particular role. Right. But what we find is pretty soon the culture kind of grabs them, and they've become a hunter and a shooter and other things. So where do the ideas come from? They come from the 700 people that are here, and anywhere and everywhere we can find them. So we take and just on a kind of a top level looking down, we have our product development group split up into kind of activity-based teams, if you will.
Okay.
So not everything we make is for hunting sheep or elk in a western state. We need to look at there are whitetail hunters that spend far more time in the field than you or I could, because there's more season there, right? Yep. Same with turkey hunters, same with competitive shooters. And so when you look at those activities, in order to really know what that consumer needs, you've got to live that lifestyle. You've got to be out doing those things, and your needs from a tree stand or a ground blind may be completely different than they are for when you're going to be out there with a floorless shelter, everything on your back. It's different, bigger objective, more weight, doesn't matter, for example. So we really split up into kind of these activity-based groups that are led by product line managers that eat, sleep, breathe, live that lifestyle. Yeah. And they help lead some of it. But then those teams will go out and do that stuff. And so, let's just pick something that and your audience is pretty familiar with is Western hunting stuff. We would want people that are familiar with all of that, and that's not always the case. So you may not have been up on the side of a mountain when it's sunny one day and snowy the next, and now you got to put your gear outside and it gets snowed on and whatever that stuff is. They may not have lived that because they were on a different team earlier and we like to cross train, or they're very solid with engineering but have not just had that experience yet. They'll get that chance when they move to that team. They'll get that chance and they'll go out. Yeah. So now we've kind of got each of those groups immersed in what they're doing, and you'll be surprised we get as many ideas from the very well seasoned product line manager as we do from a brand new engineer who'd never done that before. They've been off in what I would call the competitive shooting world, right? So they came into the company through PRS or NRL type events. But they have an aptitude, and we like to cross train, and they end up now going on a whitetail hunt, and they say, have you guys thought of this? And the answer was no. Unfortunately, no.
Yeah.
We haven't, or we would have done something about it sooner. And then we take that and really run with it. And that person or group will kind of lead an event with, this is what I found, this is what I saw, this is what the circumstances were, this is the problem. We try to identify the problem, not the solution. So the use case.
Right.
Rather than we should just put this knob on here, it should be, wouldn't it be great if we could do X? And then we turn that over to that large team of engineers and other product line managers, et cetera, and we just sit down and start hammering out multiple ideas because eventually the design team is going to have to weigh in on what's actually possible.
Right.
Manufacturing team is going to have to come in and say, this would be, of those three that are possible, this one is the most favorable for durability, manufacturability, which keeps costs down, all of that. This is the one we would recommend.
Yeah.
And then we kind of go off and start working on that.
Yeah.
But that's the easy part, honestly.
Really?
The ideas are the easy part. When you make a promise to the consumer that it's going to be a lifetime warranty, and that's something that we kind of invented a couple of lifetimes ago, is it really better last. If you're going to be in business as long as we have, it better work.
Right.
And so that's, to me, the real test of a lifetime warranty is it starts meaning something when the company's been around for a lifetime or two and proven that they will be there when you need it, if it happens.
Yeah.
Our goal, obviously, is to make sure that you never use that.
Right.
And that becomes much more difficult than just continually churning product out.
Right.
I'm not always the most patient person. I want everything right now,
Yeah.
but it needs to be right first. And so that's probably the hardest part.
Okay.
Making sure that it is perfect and that we've tested it every which direction before it goes out.
Yeah. So an example being when we were in New Mexico on your elk hunt, you had all kinds of, you had like a goodie bag of things you were testing and trying. And here, Randy, try this. Tyler, tell me what you think of that. And when I've hunted with Bruce or I've hunted with others from Leupold, there's always something in the goodie bag, if you want to call it that. That's a new product, and you guys are seeking input from. I'm often surprised of how many different places when you hand me something or you guys send me something that, hey, try this and tell us what you think, because it came from the shooting side or the military side or the whatever. How does this work? And then when I give you my thoughts, and others I'm sure have the same experience when they give you the feedback and thoughts, the way you guys take that, like Vicky, one of your engineers, she's called me, I don't know how many times, Randy, you gave these comments, but tell me more. And I've learned that Vicky's a pretty serious hunter through all this.
She is the real deal, for sure. Yeah.
And I don't know how long she's worked there, but
30 plus.
Really?
Yeah.
So for me, that's an example of at least what I get to see of your process of, and start to, if you want to call it start to finish. But it just seems like you guys are in this never-ending effort of there's never a true end goal
ever.
It's you're going to be on this search for the better. It's to some degree like being on the elliptical or the stair climber.
Yeah.
You're always going to the next step. You're always trying to do something that betters the product or the experience.
Absolutely. And so, it takes a certain kind of mindset to be in the product world. And one of the things that when we bring in folks that are kind of new to that, whether they're transitioning, working their way up to becoming product line managers, et cetera, is at first you're so proud of what you've created. And this is the first one that came out of, we have a model shop, right? And so we can literally draw something up on a napkin and then have it produced that day over.
Really?
There's manual machines and things.
Okay.
And so there's we have some real true craftsmen here that can look at that and make it that day by hand. And so then it comes out, and if it's something, a new reticle and a rifle scope, that's a little different than we've never done anything like this before. And so a Devo or another product that we've had that was truly completely different than anything that existed, it comes off the machines, and you look at that thing, it takes a special mindset to now walk with this new baby that you have, this new product that you are so invested in, and purposely have everybody tear it apart.
Yeah.
It's difficult at first because you're like, no, I thought of everything. This is perfect. Let's run with it. And you quickly learn that that's not the feedback you want. You don't want to hear how well you did. You want to hear what are the problems, because you're going to hear it either way.
Yeah.
At least this way, it's coming from trusted folks. And you get a chance to adjust it before it's too late to commit. So if you go into mass production and start shipping it, and then the whole world calls your baby ugly, that's harder to come back from.
Yeah.
And so it is a special mindset to go out and ask to be critiqued. But I think that's what you find if it's athletes or hunters or anything. What am I doing wrong? Gets you a lot more information than what am I doing right? Because if you keep doing the few things that are right and never correct the others.
So what you're saying is if you have thin skin when it comes to product development, those with thin skin need not apply.
It's going to be uncomfortable for a little while. Yeah. You have to view it as constructive criticism for sure. But that's honestly how we make it work, right? And for myself, just as an example, I kind of lived the lifestyle where I was out in the field for hundreds of days a year before coming here. So as a professional guide, I honestly, if we're being frank about it, I had a better edge then. I knew more about what we needed and what was current when I was out there, because I had a couple hundred days each year really picking them apart.
Right.
We need folks like you and others that are in the field to either change our assumptions. No, that's not how that's done anymore, or verify that this part's right and that part's not. We can't. We've got a business to run, and we owe you folks top quality product. And if we can't be out 200 days a year, we need someone that is. And so we really appreciate that. We can model most of it up in the lab for temperatures and cycle counts and all that, but it's just not the same as being out there and getting dropped and banged and carried in a pack, and you find stuff that you wouldn't have expected to find. So you guys mean a lot to our product development. We couldn't do it without folks like you.
I appreciate that. It's probably the best job I ever bought. But so I'm just thinking this through as you're talking about that, and I don't know if there are any other domestic rifle scope manufacturers. I know there's some who have a headquarters here, an office in the States. Are there any that have a factory that builds start to finish rifle scopes like you guys do?
Not that I'm aware of. Okay. There are a few that are trying to do some more components and things, and it would be unfair because I don't know.
Right.
They're not and too welcoming on bringing us in, but
probably not.
Based on scale, there's no one that does it the way that we do, on the scale that we do.
Right. So, and that gets me to this observation, and I hope it's correct, but it seems like if you have control of this, of your people, your ethos of manufacturing, your commitment to quality and value, and I think you guys call it your relentless pursuit, or that gives you an advantage where, and I'm not sure if people understand that most places that they're, or most companies they might be buying product from, they're probably all using similar factories overseas. They show up, and I'm going to oversimplify here. It's, okay, I want this. You're almost picking off the menu of, I want this, I want that, I want that. Manufacture it, box it, and ship it to us.
Yeah.
And so your control over process, your control over anything, the amount of feedback you're getting and what you can change and do and get to the better solution seems way better when you have it start to finish right here, where you're talking to these people every day. You walk over to the shop and you're getting the feedback versus we ordered that batch and keeping our fingers crossed that the end result is what we want. Am I wrong in assuming that gives you guys some advantage? That
it does. It makes my job and quite frankly the roles of everybody in the product development teams, it makes their jobs easier because we can adjust right now if we want to. Everything's here. We can make a correction. It helps on the development on the front end immensely because you're not waiting for something to come in or quite frankly making a special trip over somewhere and sitting in a room and working for those 2 hours while now go tweak this and the team has to go do that and we'll see you tomorrow afternoon. So you wait for a day and a half and now you see this little tweak. It's part of what we do all day, every day. And when it comes off of all of our machines, the nice part is that we get all of the learnings. That's really the key is when you control all of that and you have a hand in every single piece of it, you get all of the learnings. And that's really what gives us a big competitive advantage in terms of the manufacturing piece, the design and the quality of the finished product, is we see it all right here. And when they come back for service, this is a piece that I underestimated early here when I started in tech service. So answering phone calls from, will you mail me a catalog, to I missed and I can't tell you why, these are the things that happen. All of that feedback coming in, we have the actual scope in our hand.
Right.
And we have all the equipment that we built it with. And so when something does come back, we can look at it and say, you know what? He was right. That did happen. It's rare. We try to make it as rare as possible, but we can tear into it. And instead of saying, well, we just need to replace this one and just hand a new one, we can dive down into it and find out what went right, what went wrong, and fix it if there's a problem. On the other hand, we would know right away if it's not that. And for me personally, a lot of times when I start doubting a piece of my equipment, it actually ends up being the nut on the butt pad that had the problem, right? It's me.
Yeah, I always say I'm the weak link in my equipment equation. I don't care if it's rifle, archery, shotgun. The nut on the butt pad, that would be me.
And, so we learn from all of the stuff that comes back that we tear down, positive or negative. Hey, this one actually is working great, and then we can make that phone call back, which is not always what you want to hear. Hey, it wasn't your scope. Sorry, we have to find out where it is. Yeah. But then we get smarter with the whole system because we walk through that issue with that customer. What do your bases and rings look like? Right. What is this? How's the ammo? Have you what's the bedding on the rifle situation? I noticed your shots were stringing vertically. That's indicative of X. Yeah. And so we get smarter all the way across the board. But having full control is much, much easier than committing to an entire container load of a product and rolling the dice. That's tough, but that's the reality, right? If you're going to buy it somewhere, it comes over on the ocean, and you get a bunch of them all at once, and there they are.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah.
I hope this works like we thought it would.
We're incredibly lucky to have this shop.
Well, that was kind of the point I was getting at. Is I think everything that if I look at, if it's mounted on my rifle, I've been out here, I've seen where you guys are making your rings and your bases and all your mounting hardware. It seems like if whatever it takes to put that scope on my rifle, that gold ring, it's made right here in Beaverton, Oregon.
It is.
Or close by, somewhere, one of your places close by. But.
We do all the base and ring manufacturing here. There's the vast majority of it. Is right in this building. Some of the stuff we won't machine all of our own screws occasionally, so we'll use we'll work with a local U.S. vendor that's just down the road or something on that. But it's just part of what we like to do because of those learnings. You can't get better every day if you don't control and the ability to improve. If you're asking someone else, go make this change for us, that doesn't happen as quickly as being able to do it yourself. So we like to have all that stuff right here.
Yeah. Well, the other thing, I was just talking to Michael out there, and I know his background is significant military background. I wish I could come out and have him do the academy thing with me. I always say I'm going to do that, but I always miss out. But I was not aware of this as a Leupold consumer until I started learning and meeting all your people, how much the military side, where failure's not an option. I mean, a warranty does a guy out deployed, does him no good.
Zero. No.
And
no good at all.
so when I talk to your people and the mindset a lot of them have is, we produce everything as though someone's life is depending on it, like on your military side. And I see how many of those guys are walking around here, and how much of that technology, if you want to call it that, or product that's being used in some of those applications end up in my hands as a hunter and a shooter.
We definitely benefit from that. So there are specific protocols for military-related equipment, and so when you're developing something that may end up in military hands, there is a protocol. It's an 810 specification, so you can go through, and it relates to salt spray and temperature cycling and all of these things. But that alone won't get you where you need to go. Having product that's been out there and they come back and say, why is it doing this or that, et cetera, that helps because you add that on top of. So real life experience, just like when we send you a product and say, can you check this out? Having that real life experience on top of those specifications is really the secret sauce that goes with it. And we test all of our products the same way. And so we don't know if they're going to end up with, my son and it's going to be for plinking with squirrels, or if the product is going to end up somewhere else where, like you said, warranty is not an option. It must work. It must work right now, and it must work properly right now, regardless of extreme conditions.
Right, conditions and whatever.
So, when we talk about the activity-based groups, the part of our business that will go towards long-range shooting, military, et cetera, we've got more long-range rifle scopes on U.S. military weapons than every other brand combined.
Yeah.
We have activity-based teams that are experts like Michael that have been there because we can't afford to field test it on active duty.
Yeah.
It doesn't work. If you have an issue with a new product on an elk hunt, it's terrible, but it's not that type of terrible.
Yeah, I'm going to call you and say, hey, Tim, let's think about this, or send you back some comments. Like you said, that's not terrible. If that testing was done in live fire in a military situation, that's not a testing ground.
It can't fail. We already have to know that it works, right?
Yeah.
And so our quality teams are based around that activity group. So when we need to make sure that any product is going to go forward, we've got a really good set of baseline testing that we know will make sure it performs. That wasn't really the difficult part. The difficult part is me justifying back to our sales team and the consumers and others. They're like, where is this product? Everybody else has had one of these, pick something,
whatever,
for 2 years, and you guys are so far behind the curve on this. That's where it gets difficult on our side, because I need to make sure that our team has given blessing that this will go all the way through all of those tests, regardless of how it's going to be used. And that doesn't necessarily slow things down, but it does delay a little bit of the time to market occasionally.
Right.
So that's a piece that we will gladly accept.
Yeah.
We'll gladly take that little bit of delay to make sure it's darn right, because a lot of the military acquisition stuff now, if you look back, we were talking about the consumer pyramid and some of that stuff you and I were before we started this. It's actually going the other way. The military used to influence kind of our core shooting group. They would look at what the military was using, and then people that were shooting competitively would go after what the military had. We've actually seen a flip-flop there in a lot of cases, where the military groups, so Army marksmanship units and others, are down in these competitive shooting arenas, seeing what people are using and ringing it out, because it's at a shoot in Spokane, Washington, or something else. It's not Afghanistan. And you're going to ring it out by running around, shooting long distance, a lot of unknown distance stuff, whatever it is. You're ringing it out in a similar environment where it's hustle, 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 beat it up, bang it up, and they want to see what those competitors are using.
Okay.
So it kind of goes the other direction a little bit now, and that's where that activity group that is people that have done all of those things, that are from units that have deployed and done all of this stuff, they weigh in really heavily on it and set all that. It makes it a little more complicated to make, but it lets me sleep real well at night, because I know by the time we release it, we can trust it. Everyone can trust it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's, I just see how many little things that have been added on the hunting side, and I'll ask you or I'll ask someone else, who came up with this? Oh, it's kind of a migration that came over from our tactical or our long range or whatever. And it gives me a lot of comfort to know that if it works there, it's going to work, out antelope hunting or whatever it might be. And I don't know. Maybe it's. I would say my feeling about how our military, law enforcement, tactical people use stuff. I hold that at a pretty high level, and if it's good enough for them, it's definitely for what I do. It's who am I to say? Oh, you guys should be, using the hunting standard for that rather than. I mean. That like you said, that's not going to work. You need that. Not going to fail. Perfect. Does what it says when it's needed in all conditions. And if that's the standard I get on the hunting side, all the better yet.
It works out great for us, right?
Yeah,
because we get the benefits of all of that testing and quality assurance. The performance guarantee. So.
Yeah. Well, I've been down to I don't know what room you call it. I'd call it your dungeon. You have all those engineers down there, and they are beating on stuff and hammering stuff. And you guys have this
always a
great
favorite.
big thing that comes sliding down. And I'm trying to remember who the engineer was I was talking to that day that when I spent a lot of time down there watching.
That would be David.
Okay.
Yep.
And he, obviously knows his stuff.
Oh, man. Yes, he does. Yeah.
And he designs tests specifically beyond anything I could ever put something through out in the hunting space. I couldn't. All these scopes, yours and some of your competitors, get attached to this. I don't know what it is. It looks like an elevator shaft almost.
Well, we call it an impact tester. That replicates recoil, but you're talking about it runs vertically.
Yeah.
So that's our impact testing lab that you were in, and when you walk in and there's that whole panel of controls and everything's back behind the earthquake-proof window and all that stuff, right?
Yeah.
So I can't do it justice the way that David does because he knows every last little detail on this. But that equipment exists only in one other place, and that's at the White Sands Missile Base. And so that type of technology is built from the ground up specifically for us because our founders, if you go back, one of our kind of core statements is that the customer is always entitled to a square deal. And that type of investment said we have to know how it's going to perform. We've got to know before it ever leaves the building how it's going to work and how it works in comparison to others. So competitor stuff. That machine and all of those dials and all that measurement equipment is hand built for what we need it to be. And so we go, you notice it's right beside our shooting tunnel downstairs. So what David will help us do is we attach accelerometers onto a specific rifle. So let's pick one that's real nasty on the military side. Since we were talking about that, there's the FN, it's a SCAR heavy, and those have a recoil trace that's known for breaking things.
Okay.
It's going to be different than you and I shooting a 308 or even a 458 or even a large African type rifle. This is different because it's semi-auto and it rattles back and forth, and everybody knows that recoils feel different on different rifles.
Right.
We can take a particular rifle over into the tunnel, attach sensors to it, shoot it a few times, and we can replicate that exact recoil over onto that machine that you saw.
Okay.
And so the strange part that people don't think about is recoil is kind of multidimensional. You think of it as coming straight back at you, but it doesn't. It comes back. It comes up because it hits your shoulder and lever. You got a lever. We've all seen muzzle rise. So it's coming back, it's coming up, it's also torquing. It's twisting because you got the twist on the barrel, right, to spiral the bullet. So you've got this three-dimensional recoil that is impossible to replicate without very sophisticated equipment. We can now take that, put it over in that lab and simulate 10, 15, 20, 100,000 shots and see what happens. But that doesn't do you any good unless you know that you're holding your point of impact, or that as you turn your adjustments, it tracks exactly.
Yep.
So that was the back half of that room. You saw the big machine that had everything mounted on it, the scopes and et cetera. After X number of impacts, so simulated shots, we can turn around and we put it on that rail system that you saw behind you. That system uses the same technology as some of this heart surgery, where they poke in from like your wrist or somewhere else, you know, and they follow veins up in and they get to the right part of the heart.
Yeah.
All of that is based on finding the center of round things, veins and arteries and other stuff. So it works out perfectly for testing. Has the scope stayed centered on a target? And so we have a system there, we call it a frame grabber, but there's a system that you can take it off of the impact tester and it will repeat exactly every time. We take it off of the simulated recoil and we test it on this machine to see exactly down to the thousandth of an MOA, how much it's moved in between there. And so we'll do that for do it after one shot, after the second, after the third. After a while, you do it after 40 hits, then after the 100, then after this many thousands, et cetera. And you can tell the life cycle of that scope under that recoil. Did it move? Would you still be hitting? And we'll know down to the thousandth of an MOA. So we've got all of that sitting in there.
Right.
And that will tell us how the scopes perform. Our engineers learned to hate that room.
Really?
Well, David's job is to find the weak point.
Right. Yeah.
And their job is to make it not break.
Yeah.
And so it's an iterative process, right? We get smarter and smarter as we go, but we put it down there until he can break it. And then he tells us which part of it broke. And we come back up and that's the weak link.
Yeah.
During the design time, make that last longer. And we go through and we've got a very, very stringent baseline. So if it's a $179 rimfire scope, it still has to pass that test.
Yeah.
And we get pretty good at designing to it. And they say, hey, that's not fair. You're designing to the test. Well, the test is real world. So we would love to design to that. You can mirror drops and everything else. So that machine is a love-hate relationship with me. It's fantastic, and I'm glad it's there. I just wish it was easier to pass that test sometimes.
Well, he indulged his time, or indulged in my questions that are, I'm sure, somewhat ignorant. And I'm like, well, why don't you just make heavier and make it fortify it stronger? He's like, well, understand how forces work. And fortunately, I had 2 years of engineering before I decided to be a wimp and take the easy course load of the business curriculum. But he was explaining to me that when you have these forces working on it, at recoil, at barrel lift, at rotational, heavier items end up applying more forces against that. So he said it might be counterintuitive to some people, but lighter is going to result in less forces, or the way he is explaining it to me, that lighter surfaces, lighter this, lighter that, is often better when forces are exerted when the item itself is
under motion.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So I had not thought of it that way, because I hear people say, "Oh no, you just got to buy something that weighs twice as much," or it's like, maybe not.
Yeah, it's a double-edged sword, right? Because the more it weighs, the more likely it is to break itself. Yeah. And when I kind of first got here, I had the same. So I. Not to date myself, but when I first saw that, I kind of had the same assumption, so just make it beefier and stronger. And they, I don't know if you remember this, you may, but back in the day, the Tonka trucks, the little trucks that you would drive around.
Oh, yeah. Everyone had one of those little yellow trucks.
Yep. Little simulation dump truck, right? That you could play with in your home sandbox. They had a commercial where they were saying it's stronger than the real thing, and they ran it off a big cliff. And the little toy truck bounced its way to the bottom and was fine. And then they ran a real truck, heavy equipment off there. And when it hit the bottom, it just disintegrated. Yeah. Right. That's how he described it to me. And he says, it weighs less, so it won't break itself. Yeah. And I thought, well, okay, that makes sense. And then he went on a little farther and said, and you got to remember, all of this is held to your rifle by like 4 little screws. Yeah. So you've got the mounts with 4 little size 6 screws, and in most cases on a hunting type rifle, holding the bases, the rings, the scope, everything you attach to it in place. He says something's going to give. Lighter is always better if you're trying to for collisions.
Yeah.
And that made sense.
Yeah, and he was explaining to me, and this is how dumb I was. I mean, I knew there were some complexities to a rifle scope, but I think we always think, okay, there's two surfaces or two lenses. That's kind of, we kind of think that, oh, there's just two, and it's just this magic. I don't know how many surfaces are in a rifle scope.
It depends. A good rule of thumb is 9 or 10.
Right, and he was explaining how the heavier those surfaces, the more forces that are being applied inside the mechanisms of in the structure of that scope. So you would actually prefer to have lighter surfaces. So they're, like you said, not going to break themselves because of the amount of weight that they have. And again, something I would have never entered my mind. Because I'm of the old, tool time, need more power, get a bigger hammer.
Exactly.
And so as he was explaining all that to me, and I could have sat there and listened to him forever because he explained about, here are these points of weakness. You got these screws that are attached to your rifle. This whole thing is dependent upon that. So all those forces are being applied in very precise places. And then there's always the watching him do it.
That's amazing, isn't it?
It's like, oh my gosh, that thing's not going to make it. Boom, boom. Oh no, this is, nothing can withstand that. And he just looks at you like, oh no, don't worry, we do this all the time. Obviously I saw all the competitor stuff that was laying there, and grilled him about some of that stuff also, and asked him which of these get tested to this degree. And he, in the Leupold creed, never speak ill of anybody. Just talk about your own stuff. He said, well, I know all of ours get tested that way. That's all he would say.
That's all I can shed a little bit of light on that, right? It is our philosophy, just make the best product that you can. And once it's this good, make it this much better. Right? It's that relentless mindset. If it'll do X, I want X plus 20% tomorrow. And after that, I want, we all want X plus 40% the next day. We do test everything that's out there. We won't. We own the test here, so we fare much better. But we know it's a real life test, and so we just strive to keep making that tougher and tougher. We test everything that's out there, so we do know what's going on because good ideas come from anywhere. But we test everything, and we just make sure that we're always the ones that are going to fare the best on that deal.
Well,
so
I gain. I mean, having been a Leupold user for, as my uncle would say, since Moby Dick was a minnow, I understand that I've been a huge fan of the brand. But when you come here and get to see it just, and everyone you talk to along the line, they know how important their job is to the end product, and they're meticulous, and they talk to you when you. And I feel bad when I'm disturbing them while they're doing it. Like, no, I want to show you how this machine works and why we do that this way. Because when it gets over there, if this isn't perfect, when it gets over there, it creates this problem, blah, 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 blah. And so just seeing how that process goes from the beginning to the end of when it's boxed up, really, for me anyhow, has been a just further eye-opener or further belief that, wow, you guys are committed to doing it the way you say you are.
We're definitely committed. Pete Moe, he may have taken you on the long tour, the very first one that you had. He has a talking point that I think says a lot. So we've been building 3 to 9 rifle scopes since the 70s in one format or another.
Right.
And those, when they came out, cost $199. And so we're talking 40 years ago, 50 years ago in some cases, for certain models. And they still cost $199. And what he's getting at is not the price. It's not any of that. He's saying, how many other products have you seen that over the last 50 years, they've been able to keep it cost reduced enough that the price has not changed in 50 years.
Yeah.
And has a lifetime warranty on it. And he starts thinking about things, talking about things that are less complicated, Craftsman wrenches, things like that are lifetime warranty. He says, this is a complex product. There's 100 and some parts that go into this thing, and we guarantee it forever. And they're still out there on the road, and they're still $199. He says that is a huge tribute to these folks. And he points around the machine shop saying, at finding better and better and better ways to do all of this, and the engineering team on finding ways to make them perform better for less. He says it's incredible. Yeah. And it's a pretty solid point. I hadn't thought of it until
I
you
had
said
not
that.
thought about it either. I'm thinking, all right, 40 years ago, what's $200 worth? Yeah. Wow.
And so it's an interesting thing that speaks to that impact testing lab and all of it, that the systems are there, and we just need to keep pushing at it and getting better every day.
Yeah. So when we were on one of our hunts, you had some new stuff that you were tweaking and working on. And you said something that struck me that I'm like, no way. You told me, you said, no, we'll just pull the plug. If this isn't going to be the solution we're looking for, I don't care how much we have invested, we'll pull the plug on it and go back to ground zero. And I'm like... Okay, so if you, as the VP of product development, are given the authority to pull the plug on anything that this isn't going to solve the problem we thought it was going to solve, and however many dollars and hours and bodies have been committed to that process, you and your team must have some processes to say, let's make sure we don't get to where we will pull the plug if it's not perfect, or our idea of perfect. You must have processes to hopefully not get to that far down the road and say, oh, we're pulling the plug.
Yeah, we try to avoid getting adding a whole bunch of value to something that we're not gonna put out there, right? So you don't want to have all those expenses if it's not going to go to market. But the ultimate thing there at the end is there have been a lot of people that came before me that built this company and this capability up to what it is. Very, very smart people, smarter than I am, and we need a lot more. Right? We're in this for generations, for long term, long haul, and we made a commitment to the consumer. So I feel very fortunate that we can just pull the plug. It's not revenue based, it's long term. Is this right for the consumer, and is it right for the company long term? There's a lot of families riding on what we do.
Right. So but let me interrupt you. This is a family owned business.
It is completely family owned.
This isn't some venture capital owned operation.
Nope. This is owned. This is a fifth generation headed into sixth. Family owned company, which is a difficult thing to do.
In today's world, it is very hard.
And so the family has a very clear set of expectations on what we do, and it is based around long-term, basically high-quality products and making sure that the consumers get that square deal, if you will. Yeah. And they empower all of us from every one of the 700 employees here to always do what's right. Yeah. And that is a very, very special thing. Yeah. So that allows us to pull the plug at the end of it. Now, is Bruce going to be happy with me if we have
your CEO?
So Bruce is our CEO, and if I go down a path with the team and I keep telling him this is going to be we're good, and we spend a couple $1 million developing it, and then nothing happens, it's uncomfortable. I would phrase it that way. So yes, we have very robust product development kind of systems in place, and we go through normal phase gates. So for those of you that are familiar with it, we use 4 or 5 phase gates depending what they are, and basically what it means is you start with a concept or an idea. This is what we think we can improve upon. Then we design that and see, can we do it? So can we take the idea that's in Randy's head that he brought to us, and we've drawn on a napkin, can we design that? Is it actually manufacturable? And so if we design it, looks like we can do it. The next step after that would be to validate that we can do it in mass production. And along all of those checks, we want to make sure it's meeting quality standards, performance, et cetera.
Right.
Once we validate that, yes, our equipment on the shop floor can do it, we would run kind of a pilot run, which means we've checked that when we let go of the machine, we let go of the wheel, the car still drives straight. So are all of our systems driving, purchasing the aluminum, right? So if you think about this, there's a lot of pieces. If there's a couple hundred pieces in a rifle scope, and they're all made of various different materials and lubricants and adhesives and all of that, to let go and say, is your ERP system driving the purchase within the right lead time for the raw bar stock for this SKU? Is that in there? Yep. So that's going. Okay. When it gets here, are the machine programs set up so that you can set it and it will run the proper main tube? When the proper main tube's done, will it route it to the right part of the building to be hand finished? When it's hand finished, will it go to the right part to be anodized and serial numbered? And there's a lot of logistics. So that we're validating that will in fact work. Then we go into a pilot run, which is everybody let go of the wheel and let's see what happens here. Clearly we've done it a few times, so we know what to expect there. And if all of that works and it's passed the impact test and the optics tests and the durability and life cycle and freezing and heating and sand and salt and all of those things, then we feel like we're ready. And there's been enormous amounts of quality checks along the way.
Yeah.
Each one of those things, clear back to the napkin sketch. So just from engineer intuition, this looks like it might be a weak spot. If we can't redesign that, we may want to wait. But that's still, you can still get to the end of the road. And when you're trying to do that, let go of the wheel part, if you can't keep it within the right tolerances, or you need to invest in a new piece of equipment, this is sometimes what happens. Is you look at it and you say, we could totally do this, but this machine A is not capable, or we're over capacity, or we need tighter tolerances as newer designs come out. We may have to either pull the plug completely, or what's more common is we bookshelf it because the production capability is not out there yet.
Yeah.
And so in those cases, it can say, hey, we're going to just take all of our learnings, we button it down and kind of polish all of it up so that later on, whether it be 6 months or 6 years, if we need to pick that project up, all the lessons learned are in there, all of our thinking, this is what we did, this is why we did it, here's where we hit limitations, here's where we excelled. We can leave it on the bookshelf until a machine that can do that comes out, or the ability to change over. This is a big one. Going from part A to part B, a lot of people may not realize this, but those big machines, it may take you 12 hours to go from program A to program B. So if you want to go from running a VX5 3 to 15 to a Mark 5 on that machine, just the main tube may take you 10, 12, 18 hours of programming, because it's all new tool sets. It's how you come in at that raw bar stock. It's a number of things. And if it doesn't make efficiency sense, we may not do it, because now what ends up happening, consumers paying for that. Right. We can't do it efficiently enough, so now your price went up by X to make up for that machine time. And if we don't think that's fair, we're not going to do it. Right. So we'd have a pretty good idea performance-wise if it's gonna make it through. Production-wise, sometimes our creativity can get the best of us, and we can all think of things that can't be produced. That sometimes does get the better of us.
But that also probably allows you to push the boundaries of where you maybe otherwise wouldn't have went with some of your ideas.
It does, for sure. And we have a lot of machines out here when you walk around and look at that. And so it really drives, this is the beautiful part, right? We're trying to drive American manufacturing here and jobs, but it really has a global effect. A lot of our machines come from Germany.
Oh, okay.
And we use them differently here than they might over there. It might be automotive production or something where you really set this machine up and it makes a whole bunch of the same part over and over and over and over, and they don't reset it from part A to part B. Right. So this company typically has technicians that work on these machines that are specializing in that type of machine. Well, our fleet out here, we need, because we make clear down to the smallest little lens holders and little wave springs and things that hold erector systems in place on up to full main tubes out of one piece. We make all of those parts. So there's a big variety of types of machines and things that we need. Well, their technicians come over and train with ours. So we've got the head people from Germany coming over here and working with our maintenance group because they said none of our guys can work on 7 of these different types of machines and keep them going. What does your apprenticeship program look like? How are you training your folks? And it becomes really interesting on that front because then they see our struggles and say, well, wait a minute. Just like I go to you and say, what could we do better? They're coming over here, even the machine manufacturers, and saying, what can we do better?
Yeah.
There aren't a lot of folks doing what you're doing, and you're out on the front edge of it. So if we can meet your needs, we're going to really meet the needs of automotive or whoever. And so that part is pretty cool to watch all of it go full circle, where sometimes we're the customer and sometimes we're not.
Yeah.
We're producing something for a consumer, or we are the consumer as the manufacturer. So.
Well, I don't know how busy you guys are, but every time I go out there or come here, you guys look like you are just busy. Is it? I mean,
7 days a week.
Really?
Yeah.
All day long producing rifle scopes.
Yep. So we've got multiple shifts. As a matter of fact, that was one of the first things that Bruce, our CEO, when he joined us about 5 years ago, he saw us running on Sundays and thought, maybe we may not need to be doing that. We may be able to give people, and the culture is, we've got a job to do. We've got people out here that demand these scopes and want them. And you know what? If it was hunting season, we'd want them too, or shooting. If we had a match come, and so they say, no, let's keep it going. We want to keep them made right here. So let's keep doing all that. And of course, Bruce was wanting that anyway, but he just for the balance, right?
Yeah.
Should you be working on Sundays? And the team unequivocally said, yeah, we need the capacity, and let's go do that. So it's great. They're up and running, and we do handoffs at each shift. This is what's going well, and keep an eye on that with each of the machinists, and away you go. So there's always something going on here.
So how are you guys going to produce even more then?
Efficiency,
huh?
Mm-hmm. So
I'm just looking at your facility here. It looks like there would be some room to expand, but you're not going to double or triple.
No, we're not going to replicate that whole machine shop. That is for sure. So we've got a lot of the land around us. We do own it. That's one of the benefits of being 5th generation and family owned and all that. We own all of the land that's around here. So that piece of it allows us some leeway,
flexibility.
We moved out here because the city of Portland. We started out back in the early 1900s in Portland, and then ordinances wouldn't allow us to have a shooting range. So
no way.
Strangely enough, Portland, Oregon, hard to believe, no shooting range. They would let us have it out here in Beaverton, and that was what really drove the factory to being where it is now. Was the ordinances would allow that, and it was nothing but farm fields then. So the land that surrounds us, we could expand if we needed to, but the real answer is in keeping that 3 to 9, $199.
Yeah,
it's find the efficiency. It's that constant, relentless push to making it more and more and more efficient every day, and that's how you get it done. It's not necessarily expansion; it's improvement.
Yeah,
that's how you do it.
Wow. I'm glad I don't have your job, Tim. I'm a bean counter. I'd be fretting and worrying, and
got a lot of smart people that I trust immensely.
Well, that's. I hope people understand that when they get that black box with that yellow, gold Leupold logo and name on it, that didn't just happen by accident. That's the product of, or the result of, however many decades and generations learning, improving, figuring it out, seeking better answers, seeking solutions to new problems. And I guess relentless, maybe that is the right way to say how you guys approach it, that there's always another answer or a better answer. Good isn't good enough.
There's always a way to improve, right? And so I started here in 2002, mailing envelopes out, essentially, right? I came out of guide camp and started in the was late season mule deer, about like when we were out there. It was in Wyoming, but it was shortly after that, and my parents thought maybe it was time for me to get a real job. So
nothing against the jobs of being a guide.
Yeah, that was they. We helped you with a lot of stuff. So just decide where you're going. If it's going to be this, go all in. If it's, if you're going to guide, go all in on that. Just do something. Yeah. And I'd been working with the folks here. Some of them had come out hunting with us. We did some prairie dog shoots, which is a fantastic way to test your optics, right? Because you're shooting hundreds, if not thousands, of times a day.
Right.
Binos, spotters, rangefinders,
small targets at long distances,
in wind and mirage, right? So, we were doing that, and I put in an application here, and tech service was hiring, and that is a job that teaches you everything, because you have to know everything about every product, and honestly, you get questions about every circumstance out there, from military to long range shooting to hunting to et cetera. And when I joined the company, then you could feel that family presence, which was, the answer is not expansion, the answer is not charging more, the answer is getting better. Yeah. And tell us how we can help you do that. And it's an amazing thing, and that's why you feel what you feel on the floor. Yeah, is just that atmosphere of, do what is right for the consumer and tell us how we can help you get that done. Yeah. And it's just an amazing place, so we're extremely proud of it. Yeah.
Well, it should be. And when you see that gold ring, you know that it's made here in Beaverton. Mm-hmm. That's kind of the indicator that you had a lot of your 700 people putting their finger somewhere on that process and doing it. So, in the audience, I'm sure, is wondering, well, Tim, what's? Can you give us a look behind the curtains? Are there emerging technologies out there that you think are in the next 5 years will become, I guess, brought into the hunting space? Are there any things that, because you'll say things to me, I'm like, what is that? And you'll have to explain it to me. Well, Randy, this is what that really is. Are there things out there that the audience should be like, someday you're probably going to see this, or you're going to see that, or
probably the biggest thing in the hunting community that I think we've seen is versatility of rifle scopes. So that zoom range, where it was a 3-9, and of course there are still 3-9s and they work perfectly well. Right. But now it's not uncommon to go from 3 to 18. Right. So zoom range is one of those things that's similar to megapixels on cameras. At some point, you're going to outgrow the usefulness because of the objective size, right? So if you everybody would like a 1 to 200 with that weighs 10 ounces and all that, but they start working against each other. So zoom ranges are things that I think you're going to see. Reduction in size is coming. So people are getting better and better at designing optics that don't need to be as long. Okay. And what that does for us bolt gun hunters, you need a certain amount of space or you can't mount it, right? Because the rings are so far apart. Yeah. But if you're mounting on rail systems, which are becoming more and more popular, that's less and less of a constraint. So you can shorten items down, lighter weight, less likely to break, all of that. Yeah. I think the most obvious that you see out there right now is the inclusion of electronics. Yeah. And to be perfectly honest on that, we're at a bit of a crossroads there between what you would call fair chase in hunting communities. So what I would say in the competitive world, when people are trying to reach out there, we've got people shooting 2 miles and 3 miles and some of that, and they're shooting at steel targets. Right. That is what it is. And so you're going to see technology just race there. Yep. And same with military needs. Right. But for big game hunting efforts, there's going to be a kind of a friction between
fair chase and what technology is that.
And so, it's hard to draw a line in the sand and say this is exactly where we're going.
Yeah, you don't want to be drawing those lines yourselves of saying, oh, this is fair chase or not fair chase. Right.
So we're gonna follow suit and continue down the activity based direction on all of that stuff. So what you'll see on the hunting side, I think, is if you want to call it that, is lighter weight, smaller, if you can get there. That's probably the biggest thing when you're carrying all this stuff around.
Yeah.
And we've talked about rifle scopes, but I see a lot of potential there in spotting scopes.
Okay.
They're big, they're heavy. We all carry them because it saves you a lot of boot leather if you can get up high in glass. Right, walk with your eyes helps a lot. So I would see a lot of that on observation equipment. If you can do more with less, there is very helpful. And same with rifle scopes, just because of that longevity piece.
Yeah.
Always getting better. We want to give you more with less. So that's what I would see is just a drive into that value. How do you get more and more performance out of that rifle scope, whether it's magnification or travel or ease of use on your CDS dial,
right?
Things that will make you more proficient, but also increase the longevity and durability and all that. That's really where our big push for the hunting audience, I think, is probably mostly who's listening here.
Yeah. Well, one last topic. When I knew I was coming out here, my mind started going back to all these discussions I've had with your engineers, and this one and this is someone who understands, excuse me, nothing about light and wavelengths and amplitudes and frequencies and everything that comes to light. But I did not realize how much quote unquote secret sauce you could create through coatings.
Oh man, yeah.
I was always of the opinion that, well, glass is glass. You buy grade A glass or double A glass or whatever, and it just is what it is. And then your engineers start telling me, oh, no, this coating or that coating or this way or that way. I'm like, whoa, hold on here. You're talking like, this is like the Twilight Zone here. This is something my mind's not ready for. You guys make huge improvements just based on those kind of little things. Yeah,
absolutely. So one analogy there is, a scope for the most part is aluminum and glass and coatings, and you can all get the same materials. But whether you call it a recipe, you probably don't want me cooking your 5-course meal. Even if we all get access to all the same ingredients, it's not going to come out the same if I do it as opposed to a professional chef.
Yeah.
And that's how we look at a lot of the ingredients, if you want to call it that, for optics. What you do with those ingredients is the key part. And we go back to keeping all the learnings in house. Well, we've got our electronics engineering team. Everybody's on site. Optical engineering, all of that. When you combine what is kind of cutting edge with the coatings and the glass and the mechanics and everything else, you end up with something really special. And those teams really have to work together, because if the optics team says, hey, I've got an idea on something here that I think can shave 3 ounces out of this rifle scope, but I can't do it unless you can get me this much travel on, X lens in the side focus or whatever it is.
Yeah.
I need you to be able to give me these things mechanically, then I can go to this recipe over here, which will allow you to pull out this whole chunk in the back.
Yeah.
And so those groups are constantly doing this little dance of what is our end goal, and well, I can offer this, but if you take that, it costs me this. And I think the Mark V, it's one of our kind of long range scopes right now. It's a front focal plane design for now anyway.
Yeah.
So it's more commonly used by longer distance shooters. It's a full pound lighter than competitive scopes. And that's a result of doing that dance and getting in there and saying, well, with the right coatings and the right prescriptions, and we cement these lenses together and do these things, so you create doublets and triplets and other things. If we do that up here in the front, we can remove this from the back, and you actually get better performance and lighter weight and more travel. And you love it when you get kind of that perfect storm. And the team that put that Mark V together nailed it.
Yeah.
That was how do we solve all of these problems, and you keep all of them on there. It's weight, it's travel, it's et cetera. That was accomplished a lot through very basic ingredients. Similar glass, similar coatings, but what do you do with them?
Yeah.
And you get HD performance with fewer lenses that weighs less, and pretty soon you can shorten it down, and away you go. It's a full pound came out of it, and it's got the best optical performance, the most travel, and the lightest weight.
Yeah.
It's like, boom, we'll take that every day.
Yeah, which by doing it that way, your durability and reliability has to increase when you remove parts, remove weight, all that.
That was one of my favorite projects. It took a while to get done, but at each one of the expectations were high when it got to each one of these gates, and it exceeded every time. So we think this will pass impact, and it breezed right through it, and
Cool.
all those things. So that's when you really get the team clicking and humming to where that dance is going the right way, and it's the full cooking staff is doing their part. It works out amazingly well.
Yeah.
And that's the best analogy I think I can come up with without totally geeking out on you. And everybody would tune out and fall asleep.
I think we could do a full podcast on coatings and the color spectrum, the all these things. I had no idea that at low light there's certain parts to
For sure.
light. And I'm going to say this wrong. I'm sure someone who understands this stuff is like, Newberg, you're such an idiot. But when they were telling me all this stuff and how coatings and surfaces are designed based on, well, anyone can make a great image at full daylight, at whatever.
Yeah.
You want to sort the BS from the buckwheat. Let's start doing this at low light. When you're looking into the low light, when you're this, when you're that, and how they were explaining and diagramming what happens with certain coatings and the end result, I was just blown away.
So it's fairly. The idea is fairly basic. If you had to pick a color to represent, just before sunrise, most people would say bluish, right? It's kind of this, there's enough light to maybe shoot, but it's kind of this bluish, purplish hue. Middle of the day, there's not really a color, but at the end, it's kind of reddish, like a sunset, right? Well, the visible spectrum runs from purple on up through kind of greenish in the middle of the day, and then as you get towards the end of the day or the end of the spectrum, it's a reddish, orangish color. The coatings, the coatings are basically chemicals that are applied to the outside of the glass through a vapor deposition process. You see them on your normal glasses. Just think of a fog that sticks to the lens, okay? Once it's on the glass, it helps the light go through the glass instead of bouncing off. But if you get into all these wavelengths and other things, the light rays are not all hitting at the same angle when they hit that front lens, so objective or just any piece of glass. And so what happens is the coatings need to be different. If you really want to let blues through, which are the toughest, by the way, the first thing in the morning, that color is the toughest, A, for our eye to see, and B, for us to let through the lens rather than bounce off. If you really want to boost that, most of the time, you now lose reds. So do you want to hunt in the morning or the evening?
Right.
You got to pick one.
Okay.
You don't want to do that. You don't want to pick.
Right.
So what we've tried to really work on over the last, I would say probably 10 years, but really honed in the last 5, finally got it out there and implemented, is if you look at what we're calling a Twilight Max lens system, and we have HD and some others as you work up into the top grade products. But the goal on all of those is to balance that light transmission. And the real challenge is, how do you keep it high in the middle of the day? And that's where our eye is most sensitive. That's also where we shop and where fluorescent lights are inside of the building. So if you optimize that, you can make them look great at retail.
Yeah.
But that's not where we need it. We need it on the ends in the blues and the reds, because that's for hunters when we're going to see stuff moving.
Right.
We worked really hard on what types of glass is used in each of these prescriptions. What coatings can we put on there to boost that transmission first thing in the morning, last thing at night, without hurting anything in the middle? And that is the tough part. You can make it really good in the reds, and then it's not so good in the blues. And so that was a lot of work figuring that out. And there's lots and lots of different layers on there, so that as light rays hit at different angles, they're treated differently because of the coating layers. And it's crazy, and they can go on for hours and hours. And it makes a lot more sense when they do it than when I'm doing.
No, you're doing a great job of it. I would never take on explaining that topic because I know nothing about it, but I'm so impressed with understanding that if you have people right here who know that stuff, they can be tweaking it, trying it, experimenting with it, and sending it to guys like me and say, what do you think? I don't know how you did this, but it's really good. That's
Do
kind
more
of
of that. Do more of that one right there.
But those parts of it that I guess I look at a scope and I think like a lot of people, it's like, oh, that can't be that complicated. Well, when I saw the manufacturing of it, I'm like, oh my goodness, that's complicated. But then to start, it's a benefit I get that it's why I want to share it with the audience of talking to your engineers and people who understand this stuff. They get to why things are different. Why, okay, if I go overseas and I say, yeah, I want this and I want that and I want that, you're probably going to get, everyone's going to get kind of the same thing. Do you want French fries or sweet potato fries? Is about as big as the menu might be. Yep. Here, you can have the menu. There's not a menu. It's kind of like you were saying. It's home cooking. You're taking some of the ingredients and coming up with your own perfect thing. And we have a shooting facility. You mentioned wanting to go to the academy that we have. One of the biggest eye openers that we have. So it's the Leupold Optics Academy, and it's just across the mountains from us because we're on the rainy side and the weather's a little more predictable over there. So it's a couple hours from here, and we have targets out to a couple thousand meters. But the layout of that range and the array of targets is set up in a very specific way, and that allows us to do all kinds of measurements with our eye. We have 2 full-blown optics labs here, so we can verify what we think is going to happen. But the human eye as a detector is much different than any camera or sensor ever will be because it's dynamic. It changes, it moves, your brain needs to receive it, etc. So our team will go over to this optics academy, and what you see at noon is much different than what you see first thing in the morning, not only because of the color, but because of the angle of the sun hitting the front lens. Right. And so glare is something that's almost impossible to quantify easily unless you know kind of what we do. You work with optics all day, every day, in a store. Right. But if you go out there and we'll lay out every type of rifle scope you can imagine, spotting scope, etc., and then the team rotates through. So they're all in a line. They're all pointed down at the same targets. And as the sun is setting and fading and going away, we like to take and set up 15 rifles with 15 different scopes and have them just keep shooting targets as the sun sets. And pretty soon, I can't see it with this one anymore. So it comes off the line. No, I can't see it with this one anymore. And it comes off the line. I can see it with these 2, but I can't hit. And it just, as it starts fading, you see what happens in low light. You see what happens in glare. You do the same thing in the morning. Problem is, summer is more fun for doing that, and our days are really long up here. So they're out there at 4:30 in the morning trying to do this before sunrise, and still out there at 10:30 at night trying to get the sun sets. Yeah. But those things are the intangibles that you and I, when it's time, and you've been sitting there, and that blacktail finally comes out, and there was a sun break, and it's just barely behind. So the sun's right behind the blacktail, right at the horizon. There's clouds everywhere else lighting the whole sky up. And now you've got a dark deer in the timber that's all wet. Are you going to be able to see it? Yeah. And the difference between yes and no is having that optics group out there testing it and finding out how do I auger through that and see that deer? Yeah. More importantly, how do I see those chocolatey brown horns against that tree in the back to tell you that yes, it's a buck, or no, it's not. Right. And that's a lot of the it's an art and a science. Yeah. Wow. I wanted to make sure that we brought that piece up because that has been so intriguing to me ever since your people took the time to explain it to an accountant. But, well, Tim, we could go on forever and ever and ever. I wish there was a way to translate what you see here and what you learn when you come and talk to your people and watch how they manufacture and design and test and review and come up, the team you lead of new product development. That doesn't translate well in audio or video, but when I get to come and see it, it's like, holy crap. And I know there's times I got to keep my lips zipped where it's like, boy, if people only knew. If people knew this was... That's the toughest part, right? I know. And when you guys send me prototype stuff, It's like, there's like notes, Randy, you can't put this in video, blah, 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 blah. Every once in a while I'll forget. And someone will say, I forget how observant the audience is. They're like, hey, did you see what Newberg had there? What was that? Oops. Move along.
We don't know if that'll exist yet.
Yeah. So that is the fun part about what I get to do and working with you and your teams. I'm the beneficiary of all. At the end, the customer is the beneficiary of all this work and effort that goes into it. In the process of doing it, I'm blessed to be one of those guys that you send stuff to and say, break it, do it, beat it up, throw it off the mountain, see what you think. So I appreciate you doing that.
Well, we appreciate everything that you do for us. We're here because of you and because of your listeners. That's ultimately it, right? So we need to do everything we can to earn and keep that trust. And that is job one every day, all day here. So we take all that feedback as openly as possible. It's allowing us to still be employed here and be as proud of what we're doing, right? That's the deal. We need to make sure we're getting you guys and all your listeners the best of the best every day.
Well, mission accomplished. You guys are doing a hell of a job of it. And I know I showed up here somewhat unannounced, and I've pulled you away from all your work, Tim. So I'm going to let you go back to designing and developing more cool toys for the world to have at their disposal. Really appreciate it.
Well, thank you. It's always a pleasure. We love having you stop in. So.
Thank you. And I look forward to our next time on the mountain. Just don't shoot an elk down in a crap hole like you did last time we were
I'll do my best. I've been trying to figure out how to get them to come stand in the road, but
or just slightly uphill from the trailhead. Yeah, like 200 yards from the trailhead would work.
Yeah. But then we wouldn't get all the stories. That's the adventure piece of it.
That's true. That's true. So I guess for the value of the story, I'll say shoot them where they stand, Tim. But thanks so much. Really appreciate it. Folks, thanks for listening. I hope this gives you an insight to what really goes into a final product that comes out of this factory here in Beaverton, Oregon. Great folks at Leupold. Thanks for listening.